with Larry Holcomb. A fantastic introduction to your book, but our computers didn't want to cooperate. Author of The Presidents and UFOs, which will be in the description and in the top comment and in the thumbnail. It's a fantastic book about ufology, and it forces the reader to take it on a to approach it and address it for its scientific merit, not to be dismissed in the psyops that they used throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which is real. It is declassified, make people feel silly for bringing up UFOs. Your book brings it up on a scientific level using radar returns, interviews with military officials, quotes from sitting U.S. presidents, and it forces the individual to address the indisputable fact that there are unidentified flying objects in our atmosphere. What are those? Are those physical phenomena? Is that some new thing like a lightning storm or an aurora borealis? Or is it an alien civilization contacting us? Who knows? But the indisputable fact is that these things are in our atmosphere, and they are recurring, and they have been for all of human history. But with that, Mr. Holcomb, how would you introduce yourself?
I'm Larry Holcomb, the author of The Presidents and UFOs, A Secret History from FDR to Obama. And I appreciate all the kind words, Tommy. And I hope that everybody enjoys the book as much as you seem to have. I've been at this since, I've been messing around in the field of flying saucers and later UFOs since about 1960. And I got really into it, writing and studying and researching the subject after I took early retirement. So it's a very interesting subject. It is a scientific subject, and as such, I've always treated it that way, because I'm skeptical of some wild, off-the-wall claims that some people make.
Yeah.
However, I am convinced that we are dealing with an extraterrestrial race or races, and I think it could be a number of different ones.
Sure.
You have to be a skeptic to be a true researcher. You just can't take things at face value. You have to dig behind the scenes and come up with the most logical scenario, the most logical explanation for each event. So that's what I've pretty much worked on after I took early retirement and started doing research. Spent a lot of time in presidential libraries. Found them quite enjoyable and accommodating. I was really worried when I started doing that, going to presidential libraries, that I would be frowned upon as some sort of kook. The opposite was true. I was treated very, very well in all the libraries. When I told them that I wanted to research the presidents and their involvement with the UFO question, there was no hesitation on their part. They guided me to the proper subject or boxes or classification. They brought them out to me, boxes of files on a cart, and I could go through each file. I had to keep them in order. They were very meticulous about that. I could not bring anything into the archives, except my cell phone, which I use to photograph documents rather than I could have had them Xerox there. But I could photograph them myself, which was no problem. And so it's that was a very nice experience. That seems to be one area of the government that works pretty well. And I'm glad I can say that, because it was a very nice experience.
Yeah.
So that's about short synopsis of my background.
Yeah. And I know we had, so for everyone listening, Mr. Holcomb's been on twice, and we have dived deep into the rabbit hole of UFOs, and I believe it was your idea. I don't want to take credit for it, because it's a great idea. And if it's a great idea, I don't think it can be mine. I think it must be yours. But it was to go through, it would be like, what if we did a number of episodes and we just went through and kind of tackled these case by case, because there are so many good ones. And if we try to approach this with the nightly news approach, here's a case in 1986 and here's a case in 44, you give a little 30-second snippet on each, that doesn't do it justice. And because this is my podcast and we can spend all the time in the world we want, why not go into each one slowly and meticulously and just explain what it is and why the rationale is, and it probably is an unidentified flying object. And so that's what we planned on doing for this one. But I'm sidetracking now. I do want to ask you about the presidential libraries, but before I forget, what we are going to go in today is about a UFO interacting with a test dummy ICBM shot from Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as shutting down nuclear missile silos at Minot missile, a series of nuclear missile silos.
It's Maelstrom.
Maelstrom. Why did I think Minot? Maelstrom. But before we jump into those, the presidential libraries, how come you're not allowed to bring anything in?
Oh, well, because they're afraid you'll take something out.
Oh, okay.
And
fair enough.
If you bring anything in, you could slip a page or two in that, like your briefcase, for instance.
Okay.
So they're very careful about that.
But they do let you bring in, but they're fine with you coming in and taking pictures, or they'll Xerox it for you.
Well.
Okay, so there's not like a limitation on like you can't bring anything out, in that like you can get the information out.
Well, if you make copies.
That's what I mean. Yeah. You
can bring those out.
Okay. Yeah.
You can bring the copies that you photocopy.
Yeah.
And paid them for.
Yeah.
You can bring those out.
Okay. Well.
But you can't physically take any of the documents out of that room.
Sure.
In fact, I don't think they'd like to see you get up and walk around with any.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't, because once those are lost forever. But so my favorite aspect of the UFO issue is their apparent interest and interaction with, I would say, first the United States and then on a global level, but with nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. And it makes sense that because I mean, you do have to embrace some extraordinary ideas in order to entertain this extraordinary phenomena. But it would be, of course, they're interested in our nuclear weapons, not because it's something that they don't have, but rather it's almost like a hands-off parenting approach. They're letting us discover ourselves as a species, but we are at that crossroads where we have thermonuclear weapons, and it's maybe they view life as like a precious thing, and they don't want us to destroy ourselves. We can go through the growing pains on our own. Like, they'll let genocide happen, they'll let war happen, because that's part of our species' quote-unquote growing pains. But there does seem to be interest in that. They don't want us to completely die, and that they will interact with us or are interested in our nuclear weapons and nuclear facilities. And then a second aspect of that is we are allowed to have our growing pains on Earth, We are not to bring, for lack of a better, we are not to bring that bullshit out into the greater universe. It is, we are a bunch of siblings arguing with each other, and that's all right. But don't leave your room. Don't bring that downstairs and ruin dinner for the rest of us, right? And that's what it seems like. So, with that, can you give the listeners a recap of whichever one you want to start with, Vandenberg AFB or Maelstrom AFB?
Oh, we can talk about Vandenberg first.
Sure.
Because that's both of these are very interesting cases.
Yeah.
But it does indicate, in both of these cases you mentioned, indicates that whatever is out there has a great interest in our nuclear capabilities and the direction we're going with not only nuclear weapons, but nuclear power. Nuclear power plants. They've been seen circling over nuclear power plants. So there's definitely an interest. These things have come to and looked at carefully our nuclear facilities. Now, as far as Vandenberg Air Force Base, this was back. I'm forgetting the exact date, but I think it was in the late '60s, early '70s.
Yeah.
That Dr.
64.
Robert Jacobs, or Robert Jacobs, he wasn't doctor at that time, but he is now, was a photo in photography. I forget his exact title, but he was in photography at Vandenberg Air Force Base. He was in charge of optics and photography there. He was a lieutenant and in charge of his field group. Now, what they were doing at Vandenberg at the time is testing multi-stage ICBMs, and how they were recording the ICBM was from a camera, a long-range camera that they had there near the launch site. But the problem was they weren't able to see the staging of the rockets as they went up, or they weren't able to see it clearly. Mm-hmm. So Jacobs decided that he'd take his crew from Vandenberg up to the Big Sur area of California, and set up his photographic equipment there so that they could get a side-on view of the launch, and they could see the staging of the rocket better. So Jacob said, we went up, set up at Vandenberg. We had communications back to, we set up at Big Sur and had communications back to Vandenberg. And we heard the rocket ignite. We knew it was on the way. He said, I saw it pop through the overcast. They have always, California, they have overcast that rolls in. But anyway, he saw the rocket pop through the marine layer is what it's called. And he yelled to his guys that he had it, and they locked on to it. And they filmed it. They watched first stage, second stage, third stage perfectly. They deployed perfectly. And then the warhead. Now, the warhead was a dummy warhead. It wasn't a nuclear warhead, but it was the same size, type. It looked like it was a nuclear warhead. It just was a dummy. So they watched that and kept on filming, I guess, until it was out of sight. Packed up the film and sent it by courier back to Vandenberg. So and then they packed up their equipment and they headed on back. The next day, his superior, Major Florence Mansman, called him to his office. And when he got there were two guys in the office with Mansman, and they were just in business suits, civilians. And they had a projector set up. And Major Mansman said, Bob, watch this film carefully. And he started running the film. And Bob watched it, and he said, Major, that's really great, isn't it? That's really worked good. We've got all the staging. There's the warhead now, the dummy warhead. I'm really proud of that photography. And he said, Mansman said, just keep watching. And all of a sudden, over to the side comes in an object. Now, keep in mind, this missile is going like 18,000 miles an hour or something.
Yeah, 60 miles up.
And this object flies in to the warhead now. Of course, the rocket is staged, and so all you got flying is the warhead. And it flies beside the warhead and shoots a beam of light, like a laser at it. Then it flies up to the upper side of it, shoots another beam of light, comes around to the other side of the object, shoots another beam of light, then finally drops on down, shoots another beam of light, and all of a sudden the warhead goes out of control, starts tumbling and just crashes back into the ocean somewhere, and the object takes off. Now, here you got a warhead that's traveling about 18,000 miles an hour, and you got an object that's just flying circles around it.
Yeah.
So Mansman says, okay, Bob, what was that? And Jacob says, well, sir, I think we've got a UFO. And they went through, watched the film again. The two guys got up, had Mansman take the film off and put it in a pouch. And they left saying, you're never to speak of this again. This is highly classified. They left, never said who they were, or maybe they did to Mansman. I don't know. They didn't to Jacobs. He assumed they were CIA. But they left, and Mansman again said, Bob, this is really sticky stuff. Don't mention it to anybody, because if you do, I'm afraid you'll get into real trouble. So for 18 years, he didn't speak of it. He left the Air Force, went back to school, got his doctor's degree, and is now teaching at, I think it's Bradley University, teaching communications. But anyway, he came out of the closet about 18 years after this happened. And at first, Mansman said he didn't know what Bob was talking about. But after a short period of time, he backed off of that statement and agreed that what Bob Jacobs had said was in fact true. And he verified that happened. I can't remember right offhand how Jacobs felt it was okay, or how he got by with breaking his security code. Maybe it's been declassified, I don't know. But anyway, that's what happened. So Um, in a nutshell, that's the story, and I think it certainly shows the interest that these objects, whatever they are, have a deep interest in our nuclear weapons and nuclear facilities.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was after 18 years, and he said he was just kind of thinking about it, and he was like, technically, they never gave it a classification. They just said, don't ever speak of this again. And he was, I think he said, like, admittedly being a bit of a smartass, he was like, that's not classified. Like, you can't just say, don't speak of it again. So he felt free to speak of it again. And
yeah, he didn't sign any confidentiality agreement.
Yeah, so 18
it was
years.
Nothing like that.
So 18 years later, he was like, you know what? I think I can speak of this. And after the two civilian closed men left, Mansman said to him, years in the future, if anyone ever asks you about this, you are to say it was laser strikes, laser tracking strikes. And he said, you got to remember, 1964, he goes, we didn't have laser tracking strikes. We didn't have laser strikes. Lasers were a novelty that existed only inside laboratories and took up whole buildings, like early computers. He was like, that wasn't it'd be one thing if someone said that in 2020. You'd be like, sure, okay, lasers. But you got to remember, this was 56 years ago. This was in 64, I believe. And yeah, now it makes sense. It makes sense that they would be. It makes sense that these craft would be, or these beings or these races would, as I said before, would be interested in our nuclear capabilities. And it also makes sense that our most upper echelons, military elite, would be interested in their interest, because if we know that if we shoot an ICBM, warhead or dummy warhead, it's going to be knocked out of space with something that apparently is just, no pun intended, light years ahead of us, because this thing's going 18,000 miles an hour at 60 miles straight up, and this, he said this, he described, if you looked at it, it looked like the missile was still, because this thing was just zipping around it like it was nothing, right? But the whole thing is just moving at cataclysmic speeds. I don't think that's the right word, but you get the point. We got to think about the implications of that. That means that there is a power, a craft, a technology that can literally and figuratively run circles around our most lethal physical manifestation of sovereignty, right? A hypersonic missile that goes into orbit and can put a multi-megaton warhead in your city. If we know that these are going to be knocked out of the sky just like a toy, it is highly, number one, we're interested in what's able to do that, but number two, okay, it's one thing if that happens, but we can't let anybody know that happens, because our power comes from the perception of our power, right? It's like, what if the Secret Service didn't have any bullets for whatever reason? That would not be good to protect the president. Let's say they're in downtown New York and none of the guys have bullets in their guns. Okay, number one, that's bad. But number two, you're not going to let anybody know that you don't have bullets in your guns, right? You're going to hold your rifles up and just hope no one calls your bluff. So it makes sense that we would want to keep that highly, highly secret. Because what do we know? We know that we are essentially impotent, right? What do you think?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at this particular subject. That is UFOs and nukes. First of all, I think it's clear that they're trying to demonstrate to us what they can do.
Okay.
They can shoot that warhead out of the sky at will.
Yeah.
They have can show, in the case that's coming up that we'll talk about later, that they can shut down our missiles. They have the ability, before they even launch, to shut them down. So I think they're sending a message
You know what it is?
Whoever they are sending a message that you people down there that are engaged in tribal warfare, we're not going to let that happen, or something to that effect. Now, are they worried about us, or are they worried about them? That's another question, because if we destroy the Earth and that disrupts the solar system, it could be very bad for other people, other beings, in other places. So these are all questions we don't know. We can only speculate. But I think that really beyond any doubt that I have, they're sending us a message, and why they're so concerned, we can only speculate on. But it's worrisome.
I was gonna say, you know what it is? On your first day in prison, you find the biggest guy and you go punch him in the face, right? And that's to show that you're in charge. So they found
not me.
Not me. Yeah, no, I would. No, I'd be a prison bitch. But so what are they doing? They're coming down here. They're finding the most powerful nation on Earth. Then they're going to the most powerful nation on Earth's most powerful weapon system, and they're knocking it out of the sky. Knocking it out of the sky while we're recording it. Just to, it's, you know, they're just saying, hey, you know, I'm your daddy. That's what they're saying.
We can do it.
We can do it. And then so that, yeah. So I have two notes on that, and it's, yeah. So what is that? I mean, amongst all the questions that arises, there are two important ones. Are we a threat to them, in the sense that you want to wipe something out before it gets bad? So maybe, you know, we don't wait until there are nuclear missiles on Cuba. We see that they're there and we address it immediately. Barricade, embargo, we send all these troops down to Florida and Georgia, Cuban Missile Crisis, and we're like, hey, we're dealing with this thing now. Because if we don't, this thing's going to grow and grow and grow until it's a legitimate threat to us. So the question is, are they coming down and going, you guys aren't a threat to us now, but if we just let this keep going for decades and centuries, you will be a threat? Maybe, or maybe they just don't want us to kill ourselves. And then the second is, and I forget who I saw this. It was some nuclear. It was a guy that was charged with. He was responsible for transporting nuclear weapons in the United States. He's in the film Unacknowledged by Stephen Greer, and all about the UFO issue. And the guy says, he goes, you know, one thing we don't really think about is, like, you know, just because we haven't discovered a field of science doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right? You know, our DNA has been replicating. You know, George Washington didn't know about it, but his cells are still dividing. Just because he didn't know didn't mean it wasn't happening. Our nuclear weapons, they might have effects in other dimensions. So we might be proverbially destroying another dimension, but not even know it. And I know that's a bit of a stretch, but I think that's an interesting, like, we don't think anything of it, right? It's like if we were all blind and throwing water balloons at each other, to us, we'd be like, haha, you're wet, not knowing that we're soaking the living room. Like, we might be destroying someone else's dimension. And that's a bit of a stretch, I know, but...
anything's possible.
Anything, yeah.
Anything.
Absolutely.
Because we don't know.
Exactly. We don't know. Unknown unknowns. Rumsfeld, right? 2003, Donald Rumsfeld. Unknown unknowns.
Well, maybe some people know. Some few people know. But, yeah. But we don't know.
Yeah.
And I have spoken with high-level people in the government, military officers, general officers, in one case, a 4-star.
Jeez.
And he said, Larry, I don't know. I've heard the stories, but I don't know. This is a 4-star general,
Jeez.
Air Force general. And he said, I'd love to know. but I don't have the need to know, so I can't answer. Now, there was another one 3-star that a friend of mine who was in the Air Force, was a bird colonel, and he was going to put me in touch with this 3-star who was at NORAD. He was one of the top level guys at NORAD.
Sure.
Before he retired. And my friend tried to get me in touch with him, set up a conference call. And he didn't want to have anything to do with me. He didn't want to talk to me at all. So you got to believe he knew, being at the upper tier at NORAD and whatever mountain that is, Cheyenne Mountain.
Cheyenne Mountain, yeah.
And so he didn't want to talk to me. So you got to think he knew.
Yeah.
He knew some stuff.
Yeah.
But and even he probably didn't know. Obviously, NORAD was seeing objects.
Yeah.
These objects coming and going
Absolutely.
all the time.
Absolutely.
And whether the top brass knew what they were, somebody did. Some few people know more, but you don't know. Everything's compartmentalized, and who knows what. And two scientists may be working in offices next to each other, and they will be working on this subject. One of them will be working on one part, one will be working on the other part, and neither one knows what the other's doing.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the way it works.
That's standard operating procedure for that stuff.
Anyway, as far as nuclear goes, I think that it could be. These people could be our ancestors.
They could be.
These beings could be our ancestors, and they could have been monitoring our progress from beyond biblical times.
Ancient dinosaurs.
Yeah. So that's speculation, but there's good reason to believe it. History Channel certainly made a whale of a lot of money out of their Ancient Aliens program.
Yeah.
But
Christopher Columbus wrote in his journal that he saw flying saucers.
That's right.
What? At least from 1903 forward, you could just argue that maybe it was a craft, because we had mastered, but we had achieved heavier than air flight. Why would Christopher Columbus say that? Like what? But before I get ahead of myself, I was going to say, NORAD. NORAD's a bit of a side passion interest of mine. I geek out on it. There's a great documentary from the History Channel that I've watched 1,000 times. But it's even back in the 60s and 70s, and it sounds like an absurd statistic. It sounds like I got it wrong, or it sounds like hyperbole. But no, they were tasked with they monitor everything from just above ground level, like treetop level, to 23,500 miles out. All of that. Well, if you do, and they said this, and they do it in the documentary, if you do the math, it's 27 trillion cubic miles. And that sounds like an absurd, like, I got it right. That sounds like a little kid. How much money do you want? $27 trillion, right? It sounds like just something like a 5-year-old would say. But the point of me saying that is they monitor 27 trillion cubic miles. Everything from a Cessna to one of our Keyhole or Corona satellites back in the day. Someone is seeing this. Why wouldn't they? And you're right, compartmentalized, but someone somewhere is seeing this. Because I don't think these. I think if these crafts didn't want to be seen, they could not be seen. I don't think it's an accident that we see them. I don't think they come down here and then it's like, oh no, the humans saw us, and they fly away. If these things are as advanced as they are, they could be invisible to all of our radar, all of our detection devices. I think they want to be seen. That being said, or on that note, I think that we've got to have satellite photos of them, radar photos of them. You know, if NORAD's detecting this stuff, why wouldn't they? I'm sure they have a whole department of that where it's just a special access program and only a couple people know. But why wouldn't you?
Well, they would. They do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah.
But NORAD probably has pictures going back, I don't know, almost since the inception of NORAD.
Yeah.
And to a little bit off the subject, I can understand, and I think you can too, most anybody is, if these things exist, which they do exist, we know they exist, it is and would be very difficult for the government to acknowledge that these objects can fly in our sovereign airspace, and we can't do a damn thing about it. Nothing.
Yeah.
In the early 50s, I guess it was, or late 40s, the order went out to shoot them down. That didn't work out well for us at all.
No, not at all.
We lost a lot of planes and pilots trying to do that. So by 1952 in the Great Washington Merry-Go-Round, that one pilot that was involved in that and had all these objects come in and converge on him, and he's hysterical, hollering back, "What should I do? What should I do?" He didn't want to fire at him.
Yeah.
Then there's, I'm getting off the subject here, but then there was, the name escapes me right now. Pilot, he was a F-86 pilot in England.
Who chased the, they said he was chasing
They
a
sent
planet.
him up, there was a large UFO just hovering over the English countryside, moving a little bit, then hovering. And Torres, Milton Torres was his name, the pilot's name. And he was sent up. And he closed and got within 15 miles of the object. And he had, I forget how many rockets he had on his plane. It's something like 20.
Yeah.
And he closed in on the object within firing range. I think his radar went out. He could see about 15 miles.
Yeah.
His radar could pick up about 15 miles. When he got into that range, his radar picked it up, and he said it was enormous.
Yeah.
And the tower, whomever, said, "Your orders are to fire on it. Fire all of your rockets at it." And man, that scared him to death, because he knew that when he did that, that was his death sentence.
Yeah.
But before he could do that, the object just shot away, was gone.
Yeah.
So they can not only hear us, but they can anticipate what we're going to do.
Which I think is a very interesting, I've thought about this before. And Milton Torres, the craft was, again, we see, had the radar cross-section the size of an aircraft carrier, which is a recurring theme over different continents and different decades. It's always, this thing had the size of an aircraft carrier. And when it flew away from them, their radars, it maxed, when he approached it, he said it was the best lock-on he ever had, and it locked on exactly at 15 miles. which was also the maximum lock-on range for his radar. So this thing just burned right there. He said it was almost burned onto the screen. And when it took off, I think it's not in your book, but I've looked up his story, and one of the lines I've seen him say is it took off like a spark from a grinding wheel. And I think their radar said it was something 0 to 10,000 miles per hour almost instantly, which is insane. This thing just gone. But he was ordered to shoot on it, and that's like, Larry, that's like if me and Larry are hanging out, and there's a big object over on a hill, and Larry says, "Go check it out, Tommy." So I walk over, and I've got a slingshot with a pebble, and it's a rhinoceros, and you go, "All right, shoot your pebble at it." I mean, that's a death sentence, right? That's I'm like, thanks, man, I'm dead. But yeah, it's an odd one. But it, again, and I think the question is begged, is why would it be ordered to shoot at? They're not just, military officials aren't going to just have this guy fire 20 rockets in the middle of the English countryside, right?
They rescinded that order pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, by pretty quickly, within a year or so, because they were losing aircraft. Now, apparently, back in the 40s, late 40s, after post-World War II, they did shoot down a couple of these objects. But they were what I would consider just scope objects that did have some beings in them. But it's my belief, based on what I've read and the research I've done, that these beings were probably engineered beings. Mm-hmm. They weren't the living, or they were probably living, but they were engineered beings that was part of the craft.
Yeah.
And the ability for us to shoot these things down, I think soon ended. That issue was resolved with whoever these beings are. But I think they were just simply small craft that was coming here like we send probes to the moon and to Mars.
Absolutely.
And to Venus.
Absolutely.
So the big boys, I don't think anybody's going to shoot those down.
No. And make a note so I don't forget. One, I was going to say anticipation. So if you listen to Commander Fravor's interview on Joe Rogan as well as on Lex Friedman, he was the Air Force pilot who chased a UFO, the Tic Tac, off the U.S. Nimitz in 2004. Great story, 2 great episodes on that. You should go watch them, Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan. But one thing he mentions twice, and this is the one thing that stuck out to me more than anything, isn't the craft, isn't the hovering, isn't the, it's a Tic Tac with no fins, no wings, no propulsion device, no cockpit. Sure, that's all fantastic, but once you get into the UFO realm, I mean, that becomes par for the course, right? Yeah, sure, that's super fast, 0 to 10,000 miles an hour. They can hover, they disappear into space. Sure. The one thing that got me was Commander Fravor said that they had something called a cap point, CAP, and I forget what the acronym is, but it's basically where they would do their training. And no one knows what the cap point is aside from the people relaying it to them from the aircraft carrier, and I could be butchering this, and the pilots. And no one knows about that, all right? So let's just, so we have that. So let's say we have the aircraft carrier, let's say the pilots are over here, and the cap point is, we'll just call it X, and it's, 100 miles to the right. When they were chasing the Tic Tac disappeared, went over the horizon, and they no longer knew where it was, okay? So it's gone. While this is happening, the Spy 1 radar system is monitoring this whole massive, I tried to get a guy to tell me about it. I had on episode 5, I had on a radar operator, and he wouldn't tell me about the parameters of this thing. But it can see everything. So they're monitoring this whole bubble around this whole strike group. Okay, so now keep that in the back of your mind. They're just recording this thing, right? It's like if you just had security cameras. You're just recording the whole grounds. Well, once they realize that this thing's gone, it's kind of just like, all right, well, let's get back to work. You know, we're doing training. So they say, why don't you go to your cap point? All right, sure. So they go there. The guys on the ship then contact Fravor and co. and say, this thing is at your cap point. And when I first heard that, you know, it didn't seem too wild. You know, sure, it's 100 miles away and maybe it got there in a second. But again, when talking about UFOs, that's kind of par for the course. Yeah, they can travel really fast. That's kind of baseline. But this is what Fravor said. And he never went into it more on Joe Rogan. I don't know if he just didn't pick up on it, but if Rogan didn't pick up on it, not Fravor. But Fravor goes, you got to think about that. It was at our cap point before, and because they're recording everything, they can go back and look at it. This thing was at their cap point before the people on the ship said, why don't you go to your cap point? So if you examine that, that means it knew before it was said, which implies either anticipation or, and this is where it gets crazy, some sort of time travel. Maybe just a couple seconds of time travel. Maybe it doesn't mean they're from the future. It just means that they can look ahead 5 seconds. But that's what it implies. If I say, Larry, you and I have a secret meeting place, and that secret meeting place is Walmart. And at 5:05 p.m., I say, all right, Larry, I'll meet you at Walmart. But then we go look at a security camera later, and at 5:04 p.m., there was a UFO at Walmart waiting for us. That means it can look ahead a minute into the future. And this isn't me. This is Commander Fravor, a respected Air Force pilot who, by the way, was tasked with patrolling the skies above Los Angeles on September 11th. So he was pretty high up there. Those are his words. To me, that's beyond just fast technology. Oh, it can go a Mach 100. None of that matters if you can look 60 seconds into the future. I mean, that's God tier technology.
Well, it's a very similar thing that happened to in Iran with
Paris Jafar.
I can't think of the Iranian general's name.
Paris Jafar.
Yeah, Jafar.
Yeah,
Jafar,
Paris Jafar. Yeah,
and when he got ready to fire, he was locked onto it and was ready. Getting ready to push the trigger. All of his instruments, everything went out. All of the ability to fire his weapons, everything. He was still had control of his craft because he made a quick turn and got the hell out of there.
Yeah.
But then all of this stuff came back on again. He was able to do whatever he wanted to do. But it was obviously something mental is going on with these beings.
Yes.
That they can read our thoughts.
Yes.
Can read the thoughts.
Yes.
Now, it does sound far-fetched.
But these are the facts. These are the facts. It's just...
All you got to do, you talk about, people say, well, how could they be that advanced? Look where we've come.
Yeah.
In the last 100 years.
Yeah.
If these beings are 50,000 years, 100,000 years, a million years more advanced,
it's just,
then what they can do and what they are, and it's just unimaginable. Everything that we know, all of our laws of physics, everything is gone.
Yeah.
That's why so many scientists don't want to get into the subject, and they're afraid of the subject because everything they've been taught, and everything they're teaching would be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's...
they don't want that. and I guess I can understand it.
Sure.
But the fact is, you got to accept things as they really are.
Yeah.
You can't bury your head in the sand like an ostrich.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to be.
Yeah. It's like doing research, right? I did toxicology research in college. Stupid, mind-numbing, but I did it, right, to get into med school. But one of the things the basis you learn is that you make your observations and then you build your model on that observation. You don't try to fit observations into your model, because that's not research. You are now trying to force a narrative.
Yeah.
If we see something and it goes, well, that went faster than light, we can't say, well, there's no such thing as faster than light. No, that means our model is incorrect. Well, time travel, that means that if they went to the cap point a minute before, that implies time travel, and that's impossible. No, that just means what we deem possible and impossible is flawed. It's not accurate. And further, it's one thing if you're 100. It's one thing if you're, we're probably 20, 30 years ahead of let's say it's England or China. I'd like to think that we probably have like a 20-year heads up on some technology. Maybe not. Let's say 10 years. But even that is a massive advantage. What if you're 100 years? What if we declared war on 1920 Germany, right? Or let's say 2014 America declares war on 2014 the Wehrmacht army. An F-22 against their balloons, an M1 Abrams tank versus their trenches, forward air support. Are you kidding me? It's not even. We could end it in a day with 0 casualties. Probably have fun while we're doing it. Put on some bulletproof vests and just walk around with thermal vision. They would think that you're gods. If there's fog and you're pinpointing them and getting headshots, to us, we're just like, oh yeah, no, we're just using an infrared scope. To them, they're like, these are demons who can see everything we do. And so you got to think, if you're 100 years, if you're 1,000 years, what did Arthur C. Clarke say? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Or J.B.S. Haldane said, not only is the world stranger than you suppose, it's stranger than you can suppose. We are dealing with things that are just, you have to keep your mind open, because, and it'd be one thing if it was just you and I sitting here making random claims, because that's an easy blank check to say whatever you want. Oh, it's god tier technology, but these are from decorated pilots and generals, and it's
science is growing so fast. It's a snowball effect. It's growing faster and faster and faster. You buy a computer today, and it's going to be outdated.
This one
in a month or two.
A year. This is a 2019 MacBook.
Yeah,
it's already behind.
Cell phones.
Yeah.
Smartphones that my parents could not believe what we've got today.
Yeah.
That this little gadget right here has more power. Yeah. Has more power than the computers in the space shuttle.
Yeah.
Or certainly more power than the computers in the Saturn V.
Oh, yeah.
When we went to the moon.
Yeah.
And it is moving faster and faster and faster. So if you think where we were in 1900 or 1920 and where we are now, especially in electronics, of course, everybody used to say by the time 1980, 1990 gets here, everybody's going to be flying around in little jet-powered vehicles, and cars will be they'll be replaced by other means of transportation. Well, that hasn't happened. We're still primarily using the internal combustion engine, much better than it was back then, but we're still there. But that's going to change shortly too. Yeah. I mean, we're at some point we're going to give up on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that happening.
Yeah.
Now. With electric automobiles.
Yeah.
And even some of the exotics now, the $1 million exotics are going to electric.
Yep. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm getting off the subject. It is interesting to think about where we will be another 100 years from now.
Yeah, and the acceleration.
So what's in the future? What we'll find in the future is will be amazing. I won't see it, but things are moving so fast that the one thing I regret is I'm going to miss a lot of it. A lot that I'd like to see.
Nonsense, Larry. You're going to live till you're 500, and so am I. We're going to be doing podcasts in 100 years. But it's you said it though, right? Because think about what's happened between 1920 and now. It's not only that, it's the rate of acceleration. It's not the same as what happened between 1820 and 1920. It's the acceleration is, Ray Kurzweil, his The Singularity is Near, his great book from the 90s, I think. Moore's Law, exponential growth. It's the hockey stick. It's going faster and faster and faster. So even if they were only 1,000 years ahead, we wouldn't be able to compare them. And an analogy I used talking with a friend of mine who loves UFOs. She and I were talking, and I thought of this, and I'll do this analogy, and then we'll jump on to Vandenberg to Maelstrom. But I was thinking, those uncontacted tribes. You ever seen those? They're South Pacific Island. For everyone listening, there are tribes of people, and I don't think maybe in the Amazon, but sometimes they find them in islands out in the middle of the ocean, and they're uncontacted, meaning they don't know about the rest of the world. They live on their little island, and that is, they are at prehistoric levels, loincloths, basic fires, mud huts maybe, but it is primitive man. And when we go there, and they have no idea about the world, that they don't know about Skype and Zoom and glasses and iPhones and the news, and they just live there. And whenever we go near them, not only they throw spears at helicopters, they shoot arrows. One white guy went there with a Bible and tried to convert him, and I think they killed him. What a moron. But point is you got to think from their perspective. So we see it and we're like, oh, that's crazy. Wow, an uncontacted tribe. Imagine that. What a crazy thing. And then he kind of goes out your ear and you're like, whatever, what football teams are playing tonight, right? But you got to think of it from their standpoint, all right? You see a helicopter, right? So just put you in their mind. There's a helicopter. They don't know what a helicopter is. So what are they going to see? What is their empirical data going to be? There is a thundering noise. It's a repetitive thundering noise. Okay, so it's a steady beat. They don't have anything that can make a steady beat like that. Here it comes. It's a black thing on the horizon. It's coming closer. It probably looks like a demon, right? Think of a Black Hawk. All black, loud as hell. And there's rotor wash. It's blowing all the ocean water out. It's sitting right there above the water. So it's not a bird because it's not standing still. Birds don't stand still like that. This thing's standing still. It's massive. It's the size of a city bus. They've never seen glass before. So what is that? What's that windshield? There's a shiny, clear barrier, okay? It's got wheels on the bottom of it. They don't have wheels. This whole thing, this isn't a natural form, right? This is made by ore, smelting, melting, forming the panels on the side of it. They're not in the Iron Age yet. So this thing has got a smooth black fuselage or a cabin or whatever it is, right? It's long. It's got lights on it. They don't know anything hanging off of it. If they do see someone hanging off on it, they see a person, to them, that probably looks like a giant bird holding on to a person. So they don't even know that they're controlling it. And what if there's a glare in the cockpit and they can't see the people inside? So they don't even know that there's people inside. This is just a demon just right above there. Think of how insane that is to them. And now imagine if one tribe member Tommy, sees it, and I go back to you, tribe member Larry, and we're both standing there in our stupid loincloths with face paint and dirty fingernails, and I come back to you, and not only was that the craziest thing I see, but I come to you, and I try to tell you about it, but I don't have words I don't say, hey, this thing had a glass cockpit. We don't have those words. So I come to you and I go, there's this thing in the front, was shiny and it was smooth and it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It was the size of a rock, a big rock, and it's right above the water and it was kicking water up and it just stared at me. You're going to look at me and say, you're high. So put that in 2020 and you see a flying saucer the size of a city block, silent, and then it takes off like a spark off a grinding wheel. What the hell are you going to think? But we know for a fact, you can go watch videos of them looking at uncontacted tribes. And what do the uncontacted tribes do? They freak out and they throw rocks, spears, and arrows at it. What do? We fire our missiles at it. That's exactly what we do. So we can see this thing repeating itself, this pattern. So if you can literally go watch on YouTube, you can pause this podcast and go watch on YouTube Amazonian uncontacted tribes. Why in the world could that extraordinary thing, why not just happen again? Aliens looking at us. They come to us and go, an uncontacted planet. They don't know anything about the galactic neighborhood. Wow. That could be us.
Well, they certainly know all about us.
But no, we don't know about them is what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the example you were making, during the Second World War, I'm sure you know this, that when we would take an island, one of these islands, and it had these primitive tribes on it that had never seen white man.
Yeah.
And our machines, we came down, would go to these islands and come down out of the sky, and they thought we were gods from heaven or somewhere.
Yeah.
That we were gods and from heaven. Then after they got a little used to us, now I don't know if there was some initial fighting with bows and arrows or not, but all our soldiers had weapons. They really didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
We were moving whole corps in. But anyway, after they got used to us, used to these guards from the sky, we'd start bringing
supplies,
aircraft in that was loaded down with rations for them, food, and all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
And so to them, the gods from heaven were bringing them food and
manna
stuff.
Yeah.
Then when the war was over and we left, they couldn't figure where we'd gone. So they paid. This was on television.
Yeah, no, I know exactly.
I don't know.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
They made
they made effigies in the shape of cargo planes,
airplane or something out of
in their church,
palm leaves, and hoping that the gods would see it and they'd come back. They were trying to get us to come back and bring them more stuff.
Yeah. No, I know exactly. Yeah, there's stories of that, and there's stories of sometimes and it gets even crazier. Sometimes we would drop supplies on islands that we didn't mean to. So they didn't even see the white men. We just accidentally dropped supplies on an island, and some Air Force guy got his ass chewed out and whatever. But you got to think of it from these tribesmen. This thing comes out of the sky, a massive plane. This thing comes out. What the hell is this? They open it up, and there's Zippo lighters, there's clean water, there's matches, there's clothes and blankets and food. The best food they've ever tasted. that's a god. That is a god in the shape of a really big bird. So they started, decades after the war, they would find these like little huts they had, like their place of worship, and they had effigies made out of mud and sticks and in the shape of World War II cargo planes, because they were just, the gods are there. How do we get the gods back? We need to make an offering.
Well, and you go back and you think pre-biblical times.
Yeah.
If
Ezekiel's wheel,
our ancestors, if the story of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, has some, I don't want to say some truth to it, but it happened, probably not in the way that it's written that it happened, but it happened. And these beings that came down probably initially planted life here.
Sure. Absolutely.
And that's where it came from. This stuff of us rising up from amoebas swimming in pools of water, I think is a bunch of bunk. I think that you go back and you look, I mean, we know too much about archaeology now and what's going on in the world. What we see in ancient ruins, we cannot duplicate today.
Oh, I know.
You've got stones that are carved out stones that we don't have the ability today to lift them.
Yeah. Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, they are on Joe Rogan a lot. That's their whole thing, is they go back and they're like, there are these rocks that we couldn't place these with 2020 technology.
No.
It's insane. No. Yeah. They said rocks fit so tightly together you can't put a credit card in. But
yeah, look at Puma Punke.
Yeah. Göbekli Tepe. They're insane.
I can't, huh?
I said
what were you saying? There was
Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe, right?
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe.
Same sort of thing.
Yep.
So they just, you can say that it took 10,000 people to move these stones, but that's absurd.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. How did they carve them?
Yeah.
How did they make them fit so perfectly?
How did they bring them from the quarry 500 miles away?
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell? That's one thing I think of is like if you wanted to leave a message that you were, I'm trying to think of an analogy. Like what would, okay, because at first glance, right, it's just we'll say it's a pyramid, whatever. Okay, sure, big pyramid, you think, okay, sure, some egotistical pharaoh, he's like, hey, I'm going to build this thing to me, all right. But as time goes on and you start to realize it's aligned with Orion's belt in a certain way, or these structures that are aligned perfectly on the north-south axis, and they have significant importance when you put on latitude and longitude, and the way these things are made, and then there's some of them are built that if you examine it, they actually represent mathematical theorems like E or pi or the Fibonacci sequence. You have to start looking at it and go, okay, this rock is 10,000 years old, but it is representing scientific data and mathematical laws that we didn't discover until the 17 and 1800s. So there's a sort of it's like if you discovered a pyramid and then inside there's some cement and you opened it up and it said Bob was here, finger painting in the cement.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, what, that modern cement didn't exist that time. Well, at some point you got to go, well, maybe this wasn't maybe this was a modern man 2,000 years ago. I think it absolutely is. It's a way of, I don't think our model of our past is what happened. I don't claim to know what it is, but I think there are too many holes being punched in it to say, Dr. Robert Schoch, right? He said that there's There's water erosion on the base of the Sphinx, but there wasn't enough. It had water erosion from several thousand years of raining, but it hasn't rained in the Nile since 8,000 BC. So it had to have been built by at least like 12,000 BC, which just throws the entire model off, right? We are getting way off the realm of UFOs, but
I know.
Larry, I'm gonna use the restroom. I don't know if you need to use the restroom, but let's come back and jump onto Maelstrom Air Force Base.
I'm fine.
You're fine.
Everything's fine.
Well, you have a better bladder than I.
Can you hear me all right? I just got a message that my external microphone switched off.
I can hear you just fine.
You can still hear me okay?
Hear you just fine. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, Larry. Tell the good people where they can find your book.
All right. The book is available at Amazon is the primary. They carry it. I don't know if it's still in hardcover, if they have it in hardcover like this, but the softcover book has an afterword, a 3-chapter afterword in it that covers some new information that was not available at the time I wrote the original book. So it may actually be better to get the softcover, which again is available from Amazon. Bookstores can order it. When it first came out, most of the bookstores had it, but I doubt that's the case now. But they could order it for you. But Amazon is really the primary best place to get it, I think, as well as the other online bookstores. But anyway, I hope you'll enjoy it.
Perfect.
Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. So Larry and I went way off topic, clearly, ended up on pyramids and biblical times and Columbus, but hey, that's how this podcast goes. So we'll reel it back in to the center line. Larry, if you would, how about you give the people a brief synopsis of Maelstrom Air Force Base, just as you did with Vandenberg.
Maelstrom is another very, very interesting subject because it involves nuclear missiles. This was 1967, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think it was around 1967. And what happened is, the person that brought this out, made this public, was a captain at the time in the Air Force that was a launch officer at an ICM base. And I think that base, I may be wrong, but I think that base was near Minot, North Dakota. I may be wrong on that. But anyway, Maelstrom Air Force Base. And as such, he was down in the concrete underground, 60 feet underground control center for this particular array of nuclear missiles, 10 missiles, I believe. I think they control 10 missile silos. That was, I can't remember the company, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. The fellow's name is Robert Salas, and I know Bob. We met at Roswell during the UFO festival, where we were both speaking. And Bob's story is that he was below the actual flight commander. His boss was taking a nap, and Bob was in control, in command, and he got a call from the surface. Is one of his guards on the surface, and said, "Captain, we've got a strange object in the distance that's glowing, moving around erratically, and what should we do?" Sal said, "Oh, what does it look like?" He said, "I can't tell. It's just a round glob." And Sal said, "Well, just keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't get near the gates, the enclosed area." So he hung up, didn't think any more about it for a few minutes. Phone rang again, and the guard was in a panic voice, according to Bob, screaming that the thing was overhead. They could see it clearly. It's this glowing disc that was right overhead, right over the fenced-in compound. And what are we going to do? Well, Bob said, "Hold on a minute," and he went to wake up his CO. They in the capsule, the underground capsule. They had a little sleeping bunk there where people could nap on and what have you. Anyway, he went to wake him up, and just at the time he was waking him up, the klaxon went off, sounded, and Bob ran back, and I guess it was a major, came with him, and they looked, and their missiles started going offline, one after the other, boom, boom, boom. Now, these missiles were, I think I remember that they were spaced about 100 miles apart. Now, that name may not be accurate. I can't remember the details of all of these things, but I think that's about accurate. I mean, they weren't close together, and they were independently operating.
Yeah.
They were fired from this control center, but they were all independent. They weren't tied in together in any way. And so, boom, 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 these missiles start going offline. No reason for it. Couldn't understand it. Never happened before. They may have a malfunction with one every now and then, but not all of them. One right after the other. So after this happened, the object took off, left. They didn't see it anymore. Anyways, I recall the story goes that it was sometime later that I believe it was Oscar Company. Now, I don't know if that was Bob's company or it was another one, but there was another company that found out what had happened to Bob's unit, and let them know that the same thing had happened to them a week before. So you had two of these events, 1 week, and then the following week, another group, or Oscar group, Oscar Command, whatever, which really sort of shook things up around there. But the end result was they had all of them, all the people present, had to sign a
non-disclosure act,
non-whatever
agreement. Yeah.
That they would not disclose anything about these incidents. And I think the fine for talking about them, anything that you had to sign a non-disclosure agreement with, could give you a $10,000 fine and 10 years in Leavenworth. I believe that's correct. In any case, a number of years passed, and Bob told me that he said, I was in a bookstore. He had retired from the Air Force. He worked. He didn't make a career in the Air Force. He worked in some electronics field. But anyway, he's a graduate of the Air Force Academy. And he was in a bookstore, and it may be 15, 18 years later. And he happened to pick up a book on UFOs. It was Timothy Good's book on, I can't recall the name of the book. It's one of Timothy's first books. But anyway, he was thumbing through this book, and he saw mention of his own event in this book. So he contacts, I forget right offhand who he contacted. I was originally thought he said he contacted an attorney, but I think he contacted somebody involved in the UFO scene, and they got, I think, in touch with an attorney who wrote a letter to the Air Force asking them if this event was still classified because it was noted in a book that had been published. They got a letter back from the Air Force and said, yes, it is still classified top secret, but it needs to be declassified now because of the time that's elapsed. So it will be declassified, meaning Bob could go ahead and tell his story, which he did. And that's how the story of the Maelstrom UFO event came out. There was also one other event that had a UFO that moved a concrete, and I forget the weight of the concrete, but it was some fantastic weight. Well, I don't know how many tons, but it was a tremendous weight. And it's a concrete lid that was over the silo. And that before the missile was launched, this concrete lid would move on rails off of the top of the silo before the missile, of course, launched. And a UFO, it was reported, had actually moved one of these picked it up and moved it to another location. All of this indicates, is going back to what we were talking about earlier, that these beings, whatever they are trying to demonstrate to us what they can do, the power they have, and their concern over our use of nuclear power. So that's a story in a nutshell. Both of these I cover in the book in some detail, and in both instances that we discussed, both Robert Jacobs at Vandenberg and Bob Salas gave me a background on the event, and I put it in the book in their own words. So it's covered very accurately. So that's the event, and I think both of these events fit nicely with what we've been talking about. Yeah. I can imagine that if whatever interest they have in us seems to be a concern to them one way or another, whether it's a concern over our welfare or their welfare, I don't know. But there is, I think that without question, there's a concern there.
Yeah.
And it's just not those two events. There are a number of events that have occurred that involved UFOs and nuclear weapons or nuclear power, as well as nuclear power stations. It's a warning. Hopefully, whoever is handling these events and affairs, the UFO issue within the government, knows what's going on and has limited our nuclear power, because I don't think at this point, if we got into a nuclear conflict, it would be the end of life on this planet as we know it. I don't think we could survive. I mean,
not at all.
There's no way we could be attacked without knowing the attack was coming. And the same is true with whatever nation will want to attack us. So consequently, what you'd have is missiles passing each other, and you got one side of the earth is demolished, the other side of the earth is demolished, and there you have it. I guess I'm somewhat of a hawk, but I'm not a hawk when it comes to nuclear weapons.
No.
I think that we need to take care of our country, but not with nuclear weapons.
No, nuclear weapons is the end of. I would definitely say I'm more hawkish as well, except with nuclear, because you cannot win. There is absolutely no winning. No one wins. Even if you survive, what kind of a life is living in a sterile bunker with artificial lighting and dried food for the next 100 generations? It's not. It is an erasure of life. You can't. There's no winning. There's absolutely no winning. The bombs we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki are firecrackers compared to the weapons we have today.
Oh yeah.
And the numbers too. You cannot win. I think that's one of the Soviet premiers said that when he got into office, was when he was briefed on the extent of the Soviet arsenal. He said he couldn't sleep for 3 days because he just thought, if we use these, it's the end of civilization. We are going to be pre-Egypt. We're going to be back to sticks and stones. And then he said he had the realization that we can't use these. And anyone in charge of these deep down knows they'll never press the button. And he said once he realized that, he slept like a baby. They are the ultimate deterrent, but you can't use them. Because Eisenhower knew that. And that's why he was so hell-bent on having a limited nuclear response, because he said there's no post-nuclear world. It's like there's none. It's over. The whole thing's over. The earth is radiated. It's charred. Everything's on fire. The atmosphere, we're going into a nuclear winter. You cannot survive. It will be uninhabitable for the next 150,000 years.
Yeah.
So that's
right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And it may have happened in the past.
Exactly. That's the thing is we might be. They might have come and planted us here 100,000 years ago, and they've done this 1,000,000 times throughout all the galaxies. Nuclear annihilation might be. That might be like an accepted thing that just happens, right? Let's say you're a principal at a school, and one kid keeps getting in trouble for stealing staplers or something, right? Well, if you've been at that school for 50 years, And you've seen over the decades that when one boy is a shithead and he steals staplers, you always see that it leads to crime and a horrible life. So by 50 years later, you grabbing that kid with the stapler, and you're going, you got to cut it out now. And you're gonna go do a year of, I don't know, Marine Corps. You're gonna get straightened out. It might be that they've done this with so many civilizations that this is just there's a protocol. Up, they're doing the whole nuclear thing. So they come in and they get you back into class, and they go, stop skipping class, stop drinking. We're not letting you go end up as a criminal. It might be that simple, where they're just like, hey, we've seen this enough times, right? And you get one do-over, and we did it. We did Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's like, all right, that was our lesson, and now they're watching, right? And eventually, And what did they do, right? You could say nuclear test ban treaty. I don't know. You really want to put the tinfoil hat on? Maybe we said it was a test ban treaty because all the leaders found out that, hey, we're not allowed to detonate these things. They're not letting us. So why don't we say that we're stopping? But it might be that you can't detonate something. Who knows? Maybe the people at the very top know that we literally cannot detonate weapons. Maybe they've put some sort of embargo on each warhead. I'm just going way off into the weeds, but who knows if they're that advanced, right? If they're that advanced, if we went to 1920 Germany, you could say that we could go up and like put a cement plug in each artillery piece. That's not sure we could do that. It would take some manpower and resources, but we could do it. Who's to say that some alien technology doesn't come down here and just put the metaphorical cement in the artillery tube? Maybe they've put just a force field around every warhead, and if you detonate it, cool, but the explosion's going to stay within a 10-foot sphere. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're like, hey, you can have them, but no, you guys are grounded. You're not allowed to shoot these off. Who knows? Maybe. And now I'm going way off and losing all credibility. Maybe we went to the moon and they're like, no, you guys, you clean up your nuclear act before you go to another celestial body. You got to fix that one first. Who knows? But now I'm just saying bullshit.
Yeah, well, I don't know either. But I do think it's clear that they're sending us a message. And the message is, watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, we're going to step in.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they've shown so many times that they can take over our nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
They can take over the Russian nuclear weapons. They can take over the Chinese nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
They can take over any country that has nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Take over the weapon itself.
Yeah.
And disable it or destroy it.
Yeah.
In the case of Maelstrom, the builder of the rocket, which was Boeing, sent engineers out to see what the devil was going on, because they all said, Boeing said, it can't happen.
Yeah.
It simply can't happen, but it did happen. So the engineers came out, and what they found was there was some sort of their guidance system had been attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And this is through, I forget how many feet of reinforced concrete through this into the silos. And the Boeing people found that the guidance system had been attacked, and they surmised it was by some sort of electronic pulse that did it. And what that meant was that they got them back online. They could get them back online. But what happened was when the pulse destroyed the guidance system, then the guidance system, because the guidance system was no longer operable, if they were able to launch a missile with an effective guidance system, missile could be launched from Moscow and then end up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So there's a safeguard
Yeah.
that when the guidance system is not working perfectly, it would shut the missile down.
Yeah.
The missile could not be launched.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. Well, you got to say that's a clear message.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an Einstein to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. It's sending us a message. So, where it goes from there, I don't know. I hope somebody in our government does know. Maybe we're actually in communication with them, like some people thought that Eisenhower was.
Which is my favorite.
Some people think we signed a treaty with them. Well, just who would think that a treaty? I mean, treaties we sign with other countries are not worth the paper they're written on. What good would a treaty be with somebody that's 500,000 years or more advanced with you and could wipe you out in a heartbeat? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's formality, right?
Yeah, I guess. But, there's a lot of idiocy in this subject. And,
sure. Yeah. You gotta wade
just gotta
through.
use some common sense.
Yeah, you gotta use your brain, because there's a lot of. It's the most interesting topic, but because of that, it also attracts the biggest lunatics. And I can't say, maybe I'm one of them, so I can't talk crap about them. But you got to use your brain looking at it. But I mean, just purely from just examining our own behavior, right? The helicopter to the uncontacted tribe, the dropping of supplies to the islands in the South Pacific. We know that if we just look at our own patterns, we can see how it's extrapolated. And I don't think it's absurd at all. It makes perfect sense, right? Appear over DC, right? There's a sign of that's sending a message, right? We can fly over DC, July 1952. We're going to fly over DC. We're going to, right? This is where we are. You can watch us. I mean, where did they first show up, right? Allegedly, Roswell, 1947. They showed up 119 miles, and 2 years later. So July 1945, we detonated the first A-bomb in Alamogordo, New Mexico. July 1947, same month, 2 years later, how far away out of the entire planet? 119 miles away in Roswell. That seems an awful lot like you're setting off pipe bombs with your friends and the cops drive by and shine a light, right? They're looking, hey, what are you guys doing? And we're going, oh shit, it's the cops, right? That's kind of what it seems like. And they're sending a message, and it does seem like it's not an overt do as we say, but it seems like a loose, these are some parameters, and you guys can do whatever you want within those parameters, but you're not allowed to nuke each other. I don't think it's that far-fetched. Not at all.
I can't remember exactly who it was. It may have been Dr. Lincoln LaPage, who was in New Mexico in the late 40s when all of this testing was going on. And he made the statement about UFOs that, every time we conducted a test, a missile launch or an atomic test here in the desert, we knew they were going to show up.
Yeah.
These objects were going to show up every time we had the test. So we got to the point we didn't even pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that was LaPage that said that, but it was one of the scientists out there. It wasn't Edward Teller, but it was one of the scientists out there that made that statement.
Yeah. Which
is interesting.
Yeah.
Going back to Cheyenne Mountain and I mentioned this 3-star general. Maybe it was just 2-star, but anyway, he had a couple of stars on his shoulder that didn't want to talk to me about anything. Somebody said they were on a guided tour of the facility of NORAD inside the mountain. And as I recall, they were some officials, whether they were state officials or government officials, I don't remember. But they asked one of the whoever was in charge of the project there, who was ever in charge of the facility, who was probably a general officer, about did they ever spot UFOs? And his reply was, well, sometimes we see things, but we can always identify what they are. There's always a logical explanation to them. Then they had a sergeant taking them around through the facility. The general or whatever, he didn't do it, but that was assigned to a sergeant. The same question was asked of him, and he said, oh, heck yeah. We see UFOs all the time. He said, that's almost a daily occurrence here. We log them, but it just happens. It's a common occurrence. So I don't know if he got in trouble for saying that or not, but probably not. I think that the threat of something being done to you is what's primarily used. And I there may be, going back some years, there may be people that were wiped out because of what they knew and what they wanted to disclose. I wouldn't say that didn't happen, but I don't think that's the way now, because that would cause too much trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't want to do something like that that's going to probably be exposed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't think those tactics are employed.
Yeah.
Bob Lazar said his car was shot at, tires were shot out, windows were broken, somebody broke into his house. But I think these were all not intended to kill him.
No, not at all.
But to scare him.
Let him know you're there.
Yeah.
Just like the UFOs with nukes. They're sending
because because he became so public.
Yeah.
So quick that if he got wiped out,
yeah, it'd be obvious.
That would really not be good.
Yeah.
I mean, that would cause a real problem. So I don't think that sort of stuff is done anymore. But there is intimidation, I'm sure, that still goes on. But let me say, that may be ending also. We may be seeing the dawning of a new. I think we've already started into some level of disclosure.
Yeah, so do I.
And so we may see somewhat of a beginning of a turnaround. The government, I mean, whoever is in charge of this subject has got to know that sooner or later the truth is going to come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen.
Can't hold it forever.
And already it has come out. Anybody that tries to make a debunking statement about Commander Favor, it's going to be pretty stupid, because it's not going to work. The film is out. The people that are talking about it have character, good standing. So it's really the beans have been spilled. It's just somebody is going to start scooping them up.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah, you can't hold it forever. It'll come out eventually. You can hold it for a while, but not forever.
Well, we have.
Yeah.
For 70 years it's been held.
Yeah.
The government has done one hell of a job.
Absolutely.
In keeping the lid on this. They learned their lesson very early with Roswell and other things, and they've learned how to control it, and they've done it with disinformation, which has worked. All sorts of things. They've gotten very good at it, and like I think we've discussed before, you cannot keep secrets in the government that are political secrets. You can't do that because you got opposing forces, especially today. You've got two parties, and each one wants to kill the other.
Yeah.
You can't keep secrets in politics.
Yeah.
But you can keep secrets involving national defense.
Absolutely.
You can do that, and you can do it. The government can do it very well as the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
They can do it probably even better than the government.
Yeah. Absolutely. Private company, private corporation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, let's wrap this one up, and we'll cover another UFO episode next time.
We got plenty of subjects to talk about.
We got unlimited material. We can do these forever, and as well.
So we'll take a break and maybe we get together again sometime after the first of the year or so after you've had some of your. Who you got? You got Nick Pope coming in.
Nick Pope, early December. And that's the only UFO. Dr. Lynn Katai, but that's not until February. So I've only got one UFO on the horizon. I was gonna say we could meet up once more after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, if you want.
Okay, you can let me know.
I'd love to. I don't want to make you. I don't want to exhaust you. I would love to have you back on, man.
No, we got there's too many subjects. I was thinking before we started today that we ought to touch on the RB-47 event that was back in I guess that was the late 50s, early 60s. That, you remember that event? RB-47 that was doing a training flight over Gulf of Mexico and encountered a UFO, and the UFO tracked it. And the RB-47 was had instruments in it. What they were doing was checking radar. They had all this high-tech instrument, and high-tech for that time. And they encountered a UFO, and the UFO tracked them from the Gulf of Mexico over Louisiana. Then it made a sharp left turn and headed down, or maybe we came in over Alabama. Then it headed over Louisiana, went into Texas, and it was tracked on a number of radars, ground-based radars. And this went on for about an hour until the RB-47 turned and headed toward its base, wherever that was, to land. But that's a good subject to talk about. It's one of the best, because the thing was tracked with their radio equipment, with their sophisticated equipment. So it was tracked. The debunkers came out and said it was an airliner, but an airliner flying circles around this RB-47. But anyway, Okay, well,
I think we should start the next episode with that.
What did you say?
I think we should start the next episode with that. We can jump into RB-47.
That's a good one. And so's the Phoenix Lights. So you're going to have Lynn Katai on.
Yep, February. Yeah.
And she's good.
Yeah.
Plus, she's pretty.
Yeah. Larry, you should ask her out.
Ask her?
You should ask her out.
I think she's very happy.
I'm sure she is. Yeah.
She's a doctor, and her husband's a doctor.
Yeah, I know.
I
Yeah.
recall.
Yeah, they're a power
They're
couple.
both doctors. I guess she's giving up for practice.
Yeah.
And because I think she's in full time investigating, working on the Phoenix Lights for her.
Good. It's good.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this one up. I'll shoot you a text, and we can schedule the next one. Let's definitely do it. Let's definitely do one more in 2020, and then we'll jump to next year. And
okay, Tommy. Well, I'll wait to hear from you.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's always I love talking about UFOs more than anything in the world.
Always enjoy. Always enjoy.
So this is I'm a kid in a candy shop with you. I love it. Mr. Larry Holcomb, author of The Presidents and UFOs, A Secret History from FDR to Obama. It will be in the description and in the top comments, available on Kindle. It's a great audiobook, great narrator, absolutely thrilling listen, and we barely scratched the surface today. And it's a lot more grounded in science than Larry and I going off on conspiracies about pyramids and whatnot. So it's awesome. I highly recommend it if you're interested in this field. And if you're not interested in this field, I highly recommend it. Open your mind. Just entertain it. If you don't think it's true, that's fine. But, nothing wrong with opening your mind. Until then, Thanksgiving, or Happy Thanksgiving, Larry. And to all the listeners, Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe.
Same to you, Tommy, and thanks again. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. It's
as always.
Always a pleasure. Stay safe, everybody. God bless America. Happy Thanksgiving, and keep an eye out for UFOs because they're real. 2020 is not over yet. All right, Larry. I'll see you, my man.
So long.
Bye-bye.